Visual field defects feel impossible until you realize there's only four places the optic pathway can break, and each one gives a very specific picture. If you can draw the pathway, you can predict the defect every single time. Let's turn this into free points for your board and medical school exams. Welcome back to MedBites. You have to know that each occipital lobe sees the opposite visual world, which means that the left brain sees the right visual field and the right brain sees the left visual field. Everything else is just tracing wires. This is the image that you're generally going to refer to when it comes to when it comes to visual field defects. And this is what it shows. It shows that the left brain has is responsible for the right visual field, and the right brain is responsible for the left visual field. So let's draw this from scratch so that it can make sense to you guys. Now, generally what we do is draw the retinas and then we draw the tracks. Now, what you need to know about the tracks is that how they work is that we've got two types of tracks. We've got the temporal tracks, and then we have the nasal tracks. The nasal tracks are the ones that are closer to the medial side, meaning the nose, right? So if this is the nose, then these are known as the nasal tracks. And the temporal is towards the outside, so this would be the temporal tracks. And here we go. All right, so what's important for you guys to know is that the nasal tracts cross at the optic chiasm, and the temporal tracts do not cross at the optic chiasm. And this is what we are talking about. Here's the optic chiasm, and the nasal tracts have crossed. Now walk out the optic pathway. The retina is where the optic nerves are. The optic nerves meet at the optic chiasm, and the nasal fibers only cross. So this is the nasal fibers. Let me clear it out for you guys. So these are the nasal fibers, and these are the ones that cross, whereas the temporal ones do not cross. Then we form the optic tracts, which is this. And the tracts go to the lateral geniculate nucleus, which is right here. This is known as the lateral geniculate nucleus. And then they fan out as optic radiations and they land in the occipital lobe. This is important. Now, optic nerve lesions that you guys need to know. Now that we have the track, we can basically tell what the defects are going to look like and what the lesions are going to look like. So here's our drawing. This is our visual field. We have the left half and the right half, right? So we have the left visual field, we've got the right visual field, and we can see that the... Okay, so now we're going to understand what sees what. So the general rule is that everything crosses. So if this right here is the nasal side of the left eye, so the nasal side, it sees the left visual half in the left eye, and then the temporal side of the right eye sees the left visual half of the right side. And then the other way around. So the temporal side of the left eye sees the right visual half, and the nasal side of the right eye sees the right visual half. So now that we see what sees what, we can tell and figure out how the lesions would present themselves. So let's proceed with that. So the first lesion is an optic nerve lesion. So that means that before the chiasm is where the lesion would present. So it would be basically here, right? So if you have a lesion here, then you're gonna completely cut off all visual information from the left eye in this case, or it could be here in the right eye. It doesn't matter. The point is, it's in the optic chiasm. So it's before the optic chiasm, it's in the optic nerve. So what you are going to present with is you're going to have, like for example, if it's here, right, if it's in the left eye, it's going to be that you are going to lose complete vision loss in the left eye, and the right eye is going to be okay. So that makes sense. That's pretty straightforward. Nothing complicated there. Now, what about the second lesion? Well, the second lesion is at the optic chiasm. So this is classic right here. So let's trace it out. So if we have a lesion right here, and usually this can present in pituitary adenomas, right? So pituitary adenoma is a classic example because it sits right underneath this and it can press against it. So if you have a lesion at the optic chiasm, you can trace out which parts of the optic nerves are going to be damaged. So it's going to be this side and this side because the lesion is right here. So the visual defects are going to present like this because it crosses, right? So the nasal part is going to be fine, whereas the temporal areas, the temporal visual field, is going to be defective. This is known as bitemporal hemianopia. That's why the name suggests bitemporal. So both temporal areas is where our vision is lost. This is classic. This is probably the one that you're going to be asked in your exams. All right. Now, the next one. Now, the third optic tract lesion that you could get in your exams is after the crossing. So both eyes are going to be involved. And that is going to result in contralateral homonymous hemianopia. So if it's somewhere here, for example, the left side, right, but it's after the optic chiasm, then the visual fields that's going to be damaged is going to be these guys, right? So it's going to present, so if the vision loss, if the lesion is here, then it's going to result in complete loss of the right side. So this is known as this is known as contralateral because for example, if we're on the left side, then we're going to lose vision in the right side, right? So that's why it's the term contralateral, homonymous, because they're the same, hemianopia, eye loss, vision loss, right? So same side of the visual field missing in both eyes. Right tract lesion would result in left visual field gone, and the left tract lesion would result in a right visual field gone. So and the last lesion is known as the optic radiations, temporal versus parietal. This is where people panic. Don't. Temporal lobe is also known as Meyer's loop. It's important that you guys know that. Temporal lobe equals Meyer's loop. And it carries upper visual field information. And a lesion here would present itself as contralateral upper quadrantopia. So we say contralateral upper quadrantenopia. So how it presents itself is like this. So if, for example, the left side is damaged, then you're going to have right upper quadrantenopia. And the temporal would be like on the outside, and then the parietal would be in the inside, right? So parietal lobe carries lower visual field. So parietal lobe is going to present itself as like this. So it's going to be contralateral lower quadrantenopia. And the last lesion is going to be occipital lobe lesions, which is where you are going to be getting contralateral homonymous hemianopia. So if both of these ends are damaged, this is called contralateral homonymous hemianopia, but with macular sparing, hemianopia, but with macular sparing. Why? Because the macula has dual blood supply. They love asking you that. Why is the macular spared? Because of dual blood supply. And how would it present itself? It would present itself like this. So if this is like if the defect is on the left side, then it's going to be contralateral, homonymous. They're going to be look the same. Hemianopia with macular sparing. So the central part, which is the macula, is going to be spared because it's got dual blood supply.